at the approval of minutes, and we're going to defer those from July 15th because I think we need a quorum of those that were here that night. So it takes us to recommendations from Mayor and City Council, and first up from staff is Rob Robinson presenting CTAM-7034-2015 Integrated Light Manufacturing Uses in the MXD Zone. Good evening, Rob.
Good evening, Commissioners. As you mentioned, this is the Planning Commission recommendation to the Mayor and Council regarding text amendment CTAM-7034-2014 to introduce integrated light manufacturing in the MXD Zone and to amend basically section 24160D3B uses permitted, which currently precludes specifically manufacturing and compounding and processing of goods. The joint public hearing was held on July 6th, and the Planning Commission record closed 5 p.m. July 27th. There were 4 people who testified and 1 written testimony in the record at the time of the public hearing. At the time of the Planning Commission's record close, which I did not receive till after the fact, but it did warrant, was an additional piece of testimony which was sent and transmitted to the Planning Commission this morning. I'd be happy to discuss that this evening.
Do you need a motion officially to let that stand in the record since our record closed? Or
No, it was submitted prior to your record closing. It just had not been transmitted from the city manager office down to me. So I did not get it until after the fact, but it is documented that it was in on time.
And I read it. You can
Yes. Right. So where we left off from the public hearing, again, the purpose of this is, as I mentioned, to amend a specific use, to clear up something that may go beyond what the original intent was, traditional heavy industrial uses with a lot of negative externalities. As we mentioned, and as economic development has mentioned, there's many changes in the 21st century economy, and we want to be able to facilitate those. On the screen right now is the amended ordinance. In response to comments received during the public hearing, there seemed to be some concern that just by saying, as we originally had compatible with residential uses, did not truly also convey that these could be used within predominantly residential developments within a larger MXD zone project. So we have amended the language. We have deleted retail and changed it to commercial centers. We had added, residential with retail, office, research, and development. And then we have, in a sense, taken out this section and moved it down to, but these uses should be compatible with and may be included in predominantly residential developments should the zoning allow. Because again, this is a definition just for a land use, but should the zoning allow, would then make it applicable to the MXD zone. Again, staff is still of the opinion, for the most part, given the distribution of MXD zone properties, which we had shown, these uses would probably work best in a more commercially centered environment. But at the direction of council, we want to make it clear that specific of these uses should be allowed in could function within solely residential. And we believe this change does. Further, in response, in the staff comments attached, we had received comments about adding additional uses. Staff is opposed to that. The concern was the original list of uses shown in the original draft was only to illustrate the breadth and scope of what could be covered under here. It was not intended to be an exhaustive use of all the uses. And our concern is if we continue to add more uses onto this, it may be interpreted going forward as a de facto checklist, so we may unintentionally preclude a use that could perform.
I also think, I was thinking about that same point, that the narrative in our recommendation probably ought to reflect the idea that this is an emerging use or an emerging technology to a certain extent, and we probably ought to leave it somewhat open so that we understand exactly what sorts of things will come forward and what sorts of light manufacturing really will take shape. And if it becomes an issue later on, if it turns out that there's a use that seems to fall within this category but really isn't appropriate for an MXD use, we can address it then. But I have a suspicion there's stuff we don't even know about yet that could fall into this category that's entirely appropriate, but it'd be hard to categorize. 3
years ago, who would have been considering 3D printing as a viable standalone business?
Yeah,
so,
fair enough.
Staff is of the opinion, instead of adding, if anything, we could support, removing the entire list altogether and let it be done on a case-by-case. Again, the purpose was because this is something so new, we wanted to show the breadth of what could be covered.
I think presenting it as a for example is very appropriate.
Okay.
I think your list is so bizarre that I don't think anybody's going to think that it's actual list of the uses we anticipate.
The actual checklist, right?
That was our goal.
Good job.
to show what could be done. Again, the third part of this dealt with the special exception. that, as we mentioned during the joint public hearing, we think should be addressed regardless, because what we highlighted above right now, this section, assembly prepared materials, basically falls under something that is a prohibited use. And as Assistant City Attorney Johnson had included in materials that I had submitted, if something is prohibited, it's prohibited. It doesn't give you an end around to then make it a special exception. Or should this be adopted and this use allowed in, the issue becomes, why would you take one specific sector and then make it further go through a Board of Appeals process? So
That's fair.
So from there, I would be we are recommending, the Planning Commission recommend approval, and I would be happy to answer any further questions.
I just want to note, I'd spoken to Rob this afternoon about how concerns about things like compatible uses within residential areas or whatever compatibility issues may come up, clearly are addressed during not only an SDP but a final site plan discussion, and there's really no way not to have that discussion in public and with everybody's input. So it's not as if this is a by right use in a zone where there wouldn't be a fair amount of public scrutiny should something come up. So I think there's a fair amount of safeguard there that something won't sneak in. And to that, kind of related to that, whatever impact may come from, say, shipping and receiving, trash waste management, things like that, would be part of that same discussion. So, whatever impact those might have, even though that's not the kind of impact that's discussed in the ordinance, that would be pretty clearly understood, as they are in any SDP where we have retail and other sorts of things happening. And finally, in that same vein, when discussing it, the parking calcs can be appropriately adjusted and addressed if there's, a more intense personnel use in a space because of this. Not that there would be necessarily, but if it happens, it can be duly addressed, I think, during the SDP process. So I think the beauty of this is, even if we didn't list all of these examples, the SDP process could very easily qualify any of these and others, and I think that's appropriate.
And I think that's true as well, right? So if there's a large, 3D printer volume in the space, it's less people, it's less cars.
Fair enough.
The opposite's true as well. So I think, just to add one more point to it, I think a great list John has is just that the word manufacturing is a little bit loaded. We have sort of, baggage from the late 19th century, that kind of goes along with it. And, when we plug in or represent some of the more, fashionable zeitgeist kind of words like, the maker economy, craft-based businesses, things like that, sure starts to sound a lot more friendly and a lot more competitive, and that certainly is the idea behind it. So.
I think the concern that came up during the hearing in the joint public session was one of the concerns, major concerns, was notification. And if it's the SDP process, we're still giving the same notification and notice to the public as well as to...
And that's to Mr. Wu's letter. And as I mentioned to Chair Bauer, I think one of the things that sort of got lost is the process. Again, as the Chair mentioned, I want to reiterate, this is not by right. And should this be adopted, going forward, stuff doesn't happen retroactively. If people were bringing up Beatty and things like that, they have to go through this process. The only, the only projects that could come in are brand new projects. Any of the existing MXD zones, buildings, projects, whatever that exists that wish to incorporate this are going to have to go through the change of use to SDP amendment, which ties into our next recommendation. So it will be a public process, and the chair is very much correct. There is a great amount of scrutiny. I want to reiterate once again that this is a category of land use designation. As we've done in other developments, the broad land use designation is appropriate at sketch, such as we discussed yesterday, Monday night with 700 Quince. It's at SDP that you can even further refine that. You can actually pull out sectors to either allow or disallow. You get to control the amount of square footage or FAR. So there's so many controls that I think, sort of maybe got muddled during the public hearing, that there is a lot of control. There's a lot of checks and balances with this.
So
including enforcement.
Just in essence, then, what we've got here is basically a house cleaning concept of creating a new, well, not new, something new, but redefining or defining something that exists that we haven't really addressed.
As I mentioned in the original memo during the public hearing, the MXD zone should not be static. It should be allowed to be amended to reflect changing times.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I just have, maybe this is esoteric, but if someone, if we did this change, could somebody potentially, because it's not allowed now, put like a fully functioning kitchen in their garage? Right.
Once again, as I mentioned in here, again, this has nothing to do
That
with
has nothing
home-based
to do with
businesses.
home base, and that's what I wondered. But I'm just saying. So that really would not be covered here. That'd be covered under
This
Article
is
10 or
talking about
whatever?
a standalone operation, not a home-based business. Home-based business is governed under Article 10, has a bunch
Right,
of separate
right.
restrictions. It is, you would not be able to mass produce anything out of your garage under the home-based business. Because remember, there's restrictions on the amount of deliveries, the amount of vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
You are limited to the percentage of your house that can be used for business.
Okay.
So, this is truly geared towards, a new non-residential use adding to the mix in the mixed-use development.
And maybe and because we had the word residential there, I was asking that. I mean, I was really, really wondering about that. But because I think, to me, it's a little muddled, but maybe that's just my interpretation of this, and that's why there's many more on the here, just not one person. So that would
That's
not
a fair
be.
question. So to follow that
Yeah.
logic, let's say you're in the
Right.
MXD zone and you've got
Right.
a residential site with an accessory structure,
Right,
and somebody
right.
comes in and wants to turn the accessory structure into a
To-
freestanding business. Or something.
Yeah, right.
That would be a change of use that would go through that whole public process, and it may or may not fall under home-based business. But in that case, if they were proposing to convert the accessory building, it would have to start there, and there'd
An
be-
accessory dwelling where you're actually changing a residential use to a commercial use, that is an SDP amendment.
Right,
The
so you have to
home-based
start with
business,
that.
looking at it closely.
You know what I mean, Rob? Let's say somebody has a small little home-based
Right.
business, and they happen to use their accessory building. It's got an
Right.
apartment above, a garage below. They use the garage for building, the workbench or something, and they're going to sell those once a month for the next whatever. That becomes one of those things you probably judge it as a home-based business, but primarily the site stays residential. But at some point, they may come back and say, well, we want to grow that into something that takes over that whole little building. That turns into a change of use. They have to come in and go through the whole STD process. Both have really strong procedural stuff and scrutiny from staff and from in a public forum as well. So I don't think there'd be a big issue.
And it's different, Commissioner Winborn, with home-based businesses, while it is sort of outside of the quote-unquote zoning, planning commission, planning staff purview, we look at it, but it's more governed under neighborhood services, so there is public input there
Yeah.
because it is a license. So, they go through that. So the public, I believe, is even, the adjoining neighbors are even notified
Right.
that this is coming in.
Right.
So there is a public check and balance on that level. But it's just not similar where they're coming here, presenting a plan, doing things like that.
And that's why I said I may have been getting a little too esoteric, but
No, I think it's a
Those
valid
things
point because
can
that was one of the
happen.
questions
Yeah.
raised.
Yeah, okay.
And I just want to make clear, this is totally separate from home-based
Okay.
businesses.
Okay, all right.
And,
Thank you.
and still a backstop that neighborhood services in MXD in a commercial area still has that backstop of you're making too much noise. You're the whatever the language is, I can't remember off the top of my head, but the compatible with residential
Right,
uses.
and
It has the same. It has to be inside the building.
Yeah.
It just becomes an enforcement issue, which we don't want to get to,
Yeah.
but it's there in
Right.
case we need it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So the flip side of this discussion, I think, understanding this emerging component in the economy, I want us to encourage it.
Yeah,
So I wanna-
yeah.
I think the narrative back to the council is not only, yes, endorse the change.
We need to sell it.
But let's make this a thing we really are proud to have in
Right.
the code and encourage it as part of the economic development track.
For at least a month before everybody else catches up to us, we've got a selling point. We can get out there and sell it.
All right, any other
Okay.
questions or comments? So staff is proposing that we recommend approval to the council. Is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend adoption of text amendment CTAM 7034-2015 to the mayor and city council.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, Rob, you're up
And
again.
building upon what we had just discussed with amendments to SDP, this item is a recommendation to the mayor and council regarding text amendment application CTAM 7035-2015. This text amendment proposes to amend 24 section 198. The goal is to clean up conflicting language in the code and go back to the original intent. Again, this is laying out currently when sketch plans, concept plans, SDPs must be amended. On the screen right now is 1A and B. These are not being involved with at all, so a change of use or these dimensional things, and as I mentioned during the public hearing, these are very much related to and linked into preliminary subdivision. So changes that really impact how you've laid out lots and things along those lines. They do warrant an SDP change, as does change, just what we're talking about, the compatibility issue. The proposal being made is the change to C, to do away with it altogether, which seems to conflict upon itself, where it says, if you have a change that's not A or B, it can be handled by the Planning Commission, but you still have to do an amendment to schematic development plan. At taking this to the ridiculous extreme level, should you have had an SDP that actually showed building footprints and somebody wanted to put a garage or an addition, this would warrant having to do an SDP amendment. Following up on that, down in the next section, it is then amending D to be the sole one that is the guiding voice on this issue. And it's been changed to, reflect the proper sections and not a section that doesn't exist. And it says solely, to the council's point, plans must adhere to the SDP with the exception of these minor changes here. So it refers to said final site plan. So this is very much a housekeeping item. I would like to make a couple of points as were made in the staff comments. The intent of this is not to undermine SDP approvals at all. And as I mentioned in here, when we have something that falls under what was 21981C, Mr. Johnson and I sit together and look at it to its merits to make sure that, that it doesn't fall under A or B. So we review that. The chair himself brought up the question of what about cumulative effects? As I mentioned in here, should this text amendment go through, we will begin tracking these plans just as we do with two other sections of the code now that could be influenced by cumulative effects. So whenever an application comes in, of course, it's always judged against the original SDP, and usually it's judged, as with the case with impervious surface in the front and side rear yards in the R90 zone, or 50% increases in building footprints. What were the previous approvals? So we can see once it hits that trigger. So when you have some of the triggers, increases building floor area, which is one for a commercial property could very much happen cumulatively. It would be tracked, and then once it gets above the original 10% of the SDP approval, you have to amend the SDP. So this is sort of our check and balance.
You had me at housekeeping.
I just wanted to make sure in a public forum I addressed the issues raised at the public hearing.
Just let him geek out for a minute.
Sorry. I couldn't.
That's all right.
Any questions?
Just one.
There you go.
And I'm getting,
It's a good thing you carried on.
I'm getting my weird questions, but have we ever, if anyone can remember, have we ever changed the sidewalk, the size of a sidewalk, or taking it from two sides of the street to one after SDP?
Yes,
That
there
you
have
can
been
think
tweaks. This is a very good point, because this, I think, is the fundamental issue that if we took the code as written to the extreme,
Right.
as I mentioned Monday night during the public hearing, SDPs are essentially 80% engineered plans. Once you get to final site plan, you're doing that final 20%
Right.
engineering. Where you show preliminary manholes can move. If we wanted to be very draconian, we could make them continually amend from final, every final site plan that comes in would have an amendment to schematic development plan, because there's always subtle changes with the final engineering. The location of street trees, the location of manholes, the location of storm drain inlets, all of these minor things. So this is why, we truly believe the intent was not to do that. It's only with these big things that change preliminary subdivision.
Okay.
Because remember, even hardscape changes such as lead walks can be amended as a staff approval.
Right.
They technically don't even have to come back to the Planning Commission. So everything's going in for review. So that's what gives us a knowledge that truly the intent of this section was minor changes can be handled either by staff or the Planning Commission without having to go through the task of paying for an amendment to schematic development.
Exactly.
Well, and expense be damned, not really. But the idea is that really a lot of these great decisions are made at this last minute. A lot of these projects from a design standpoint are really rushed to get to that submission level.
Exactly.
And there's some good ideas that are often left on that table are just not considered, for time constraints. And so if that in that last 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks where they're wrapping up some of the final engineering, where they're doing a little bit more thinking, some of those great ideas, you don't want to leave them on the roadside. just straightening out a good manhole, getting rid of another 30 feet of pipe, and being able to line up the trees, line up the lights, and be able to get, a little better, sometimes minor tweaks, certainly things that staff is, capable of approving. We don't want an applicant fearful of violating their, approved site plan, and saying, no, we're just going to leave it as a bad,
As a bad, yeah.
a not perfect
Well,
design,
yeah, right,
you know, a
exactly.
not better
Yeah,
design, whatever
yeah.
you want to call it. So that's the
That's a good
encouragement.
point.
So.
Okay, any other questions, concerns, discussion? We have a recommendation
Beat
from
this one
staff to
to death.
recommend approval to the mayor and councilor. Is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend adoption of text amendment CTAM 7035-2015 to the mayor and city council.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thanks, Rob. Next up is our site plan agenda, and we have one tonight, and that's SP site plan -7021-2015. Meadowview Daycare at 501 Orchard Ridge Drive, a 19,813 square foot daycare facility in the MXD zone. This is final site plan. And it looks like, Marty, you're going to present tonight?
I am.
Okay.
Mr.
Great.
Chair, Marty Mattson. I want to acknowledge Trudy's hard work on this.
Great.
Yeah.
She is out of town, so I'm pinch hitting here, but she did a great job on the staff report and has worked really well with the applicants to get this to its the point that it's at. I will just go through the initial information real quick and then turn it over to the applicant. So this is SP 7021-2015 for final site plan approval for a 19,813 square foot daycare facility on 501 Orchard Ridge Drive. The zone is mixed use development, MXD zone. And with me I have from the applicants Eric Morrison, Brian Donnelly, and Merrill Strider, or Nisler, sorry. And I will turn this over to them.
Okay, great. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Where are we starting? Okay.
Right here. So on behalf of MedImmune and AstraZeneca, I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for having us here today to present.
Thanks for being here.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be here. We want to talk about the final site plan for our child care center. And so, again, my name is Eric Morrison. I'm the master plan lead for MedImmune. I'll be reviewing the purpose of the project and what we've been doing since the schematic development plan that was approved earlier this spring. Co-presenting with me will be Brian Donnelly, civil engineer with MHG Engineering, who will be talking about the site development and traffic and parking on the site. And also co-presenting is Merrill Nisler, architect with Studio MLA. She'll be talking about the landscape design and the architectural features of the building.
Great, thanks.
So, just a quick overview. So the reason why we're having the daycare center on the site, it's part of our Great Place to Work initiative. It helps to attract and retain staff, the best and the brightest that we can get on the site, and helps us stay competitive within the pharma and biotech industry. So this is really crucial to our business to have a child care amenity on the site. As you recall, the child care is proposed to be on the Meadows property. Meadows parcel is an owned parcel of MedImmune. It's on Orchard Ridge Drive. Address is 501. It's about a 5-minute walk along Orchard Ridge Drive, along the existing sidewalk between that and the front door of OMW. One of the reasons for placing the child care center on this site, one, we wanted to place it close to the wooded area. It's a better environment for the children. As you'll see in the design that we'll be talking about later on, we want to encourage the children to be outdoors as much as possible, and so it seemed like a great location. But also, putting it on that site also aligns with the concept of promoting lower density development on the Meadows property, which is closest to the vistas and the Orchard Ridge Drive. So those are their two main drivers for placing it on that site. So since the schematic development plan was approved earlier this spring, we've been working hard with the city to address the three conditions that were announced at that point. First, we've been reviewing the traffic flow. We've made some modifications specifically to the entryway. There was a median upon entry, and the recommendation was to install a rolled curb to allow emergency vehicles not only one way of getting into the site, but also an ability to drive over the rolled curb and get into the site. So we've addressed that first item. The second item was reviewing with the city the vehicular access at the intersection. And so we've been working with the city to review our traffic flow plans as well as the queuing. And I think we've clarified and resolved any concerns or issues that they had. Lastly, the third item had to do with a recommendation to look at building a pathway is it feasible to do that sometime in the future? We're still in the process of developing that. Some of the issues that we're trying to work to resolve right now have to do with dealing with the contours. So a straight line between the front door of the Child Care Center and the front door of 1 Meadowman Way involves a 40-foot change in elevation, 20 foot going down to the retention pond and 20 feet back up. So there's handicap accessibility issues that would need to address as well. We're looking into that. And there's also the stormwater retention pond that's there. I know that there are some concerns about building anything on that. So we're in the process of looking into that condition.
When you're doing the analysis about, well, in talking about traffic flow and all that, what are you, first of all, how many children will be in this facility, and then what do you assume in terms of how many trips or parents are coming on site with a car to drop them off versus, say, parking at work and walking them down, or whatever it might be?
Sure. So the child care facility has a capacity of 180 children, and those age range primarily from 0 to 6, but there are some 6 to 12 years.
None of them are driving.
None of them will be driving, but they have parents, and their parents will be dropping them off. We have a flexible work schedule at MedImmune, so employees are able to exercise when they arrive and when they depart. That means the departures and arrivals of our employees range over, in the morning, 2.5 hour, maybe 3 hour period. So that helps to spread out some of those arrivals and departures.
You probably have some siblings and others that don't come every day, whatever it might be. So it's
True.
not going to be 180 trips necessarily every day.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. We anticipate that it'll be much less than that.
Okay.
And remind us, because I know this came up, but it's only going to operate, it's not going to operate 24/7, 24 hours, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
During business hours, so
Right.
roughly 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6:30 a.m. Yeah.
So about 12 hours.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Okay. Did want to mention that we, like all of our other projects, we try to be proactive with the community. We've sent an email out to the Housing Association adjacent to our property to make them aware of this project. And we're also planning on having a town hall meeting in September with them. During that meeting, we want to talk to them about the plans for the facility, let them know what the view is going to look like, what our construction schedule is going to be, and then talk about ways of trying to mitigate any construction issues that could arise.
Yeah, because clearly the construction staging will be probably a different set of neighbors concerned about that than of the actual building, right? I mean, you've sort of got the other side of the site where you're proposing to stage.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and again, different than some of our other projects where we've done new construction. Things like truck traffic on the roads, we don't plan on carrying cut and fill dirt off the site. It will all be contained on the
Right.
site. So that reduces the amount of traffic and dump trucks that you'll see on
Sure.
the main roads.
Great. All right.
Okay. Well, with that introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Donnelly, who's going to talk about the site development.
Great. Thank you. Good evening.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Brian Donnelly from McCrease Hendricks and Glasscock. What we've got in front of you now on the screen is a cross-section north to south showing the massing relationship between the 4-story residential property on the north side of Quince Orchard Road. The berming that we intend to put in, it's about a 7 to 10 foot berm. It's going to provide a separation between the children, the building, and the vehicles on Quince Orchard Road. There'll be a perimeter fence on top of the berm that wraps the perimeter of the site, ties in for security, and encompasses the playground areas. As you move further south across the playground, it shows the building. It's 1.5 stories in the front, 2 stories in the back, so it's a walkout condition. The existing grade, the building was designed to incorporate the existing grade and a grade change from front to back to incorporate the vantage points from the Stream Valley buffer, the cross sections, and the views to the south into the trees. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, the slide you're looking at now is a copy of the rendered site plan showing the median that Eric had described. We're matching it aligns with Winter Walk Drive. We basically mirrored the geometry across the street with the median, with the two-way in and two-way out. The two outbound lanes would be a dedicated right and a through and a left as you exit the site. The southern portion of the median would be the roll curb that gives the direct access into the one-way circulation for large fire access. The circulation itself kind of runs counterclockwise. As you enter the site on the lower portion, you'd circulate around to the top side and then back through and make a right out of the site and then back onto Quince Orchard Road. The setbacks that we've established were brought forth from the sketch plan and the annexation agreement, that being a 50-foot front yard setback for the parking and a 100-foot front yard for the building. The small loop section in the front of the site is within that 50 feet, but it was not considered parking. It was considered strictly drive aisle and access. So that small portion does project into the 50 feet, but that was vetted through staff, and that was acceptable since there's no permanent vehicles there. The parking itself is all the parking along the building side, which is to the eastern portion of the site, is all dedicated to short-term parking for parent drop-off and children delivery. There's about 15 spaces along that side. The employees would then park on the western side of the site. We located the drop-off area on the eastern side adjacent to the curb and adjacent to the sidewalk for much more direct access. The site itself is 10.3 acres in total. 10.87 acres in total. Our site encompasses about 3.2 acres. The western portion of the site to the west side of the drive aisle would be the staging area, which would be where the construction, staging, and laydown area is, and any kind of excess material would be discharged into that balance of the 10-acre site, flattened out into a pad for future development. As Eric mentioned, there's 180 children with 35 staff at peak hour. So we provided 35 additional staff spaces. On the northern end of the property is where the loop road is, where the dumpster is, and we've run a traffic model and a trip model to bring the dumpster on a counterclockwise position, head in. You have an overhead type dumpster condition, then it exit out that back northern exit. The building itself was designed in its curvilinear shape in order to take advantage of the natural grade. There's about a 15-foot grade change from the street to the back of the site. The building floor to floor is 12 feet, so we've been able to find that differential pretty well and it still incorporate the 7-foot berm to create a nice buffer between the Quince Orchard Road and the play area. The berm is then planted with large shade trees, evergreen and understory plantings in order to provide a year-round screen. From a utility standpoint, the sewer is being brought up from the southern end of the property, run parallel to the stream valley buffer and parallel to the forested area, and then ties into this northeast portion of the site. Water is coming in from Quince Orchard Road with a master meter to serve the future office building with a fire loop and fire hydrant up close to the entrance to meet fire code access. The project also intends to incorporate geothermal system for the mechanical. That is concentrated on the northern portion of the parking lot with a couple of the excess geothermal loops in the play surface area. So we're keeping it outside of the berm and outside of the play top lot area itself. But we plan on incorporating geothermal testing if the test results come back appropriately.
Great.
The traffic analysis, the queuing analysis, and trip mitigation was reviewed and approved by Public Works. Sediment erosion control, stormwater management has been approved by Public Works as well. There's 5 small microbial retention areas on the property that provide water quality and quality control think with that, I'll just probably wrap it up and turn it over to Merle.
Let me ask you a quick question about the driveway configuration. I know you don't have anything established for what happens with the rest of the Meadows site, the north, kind of west, whatever that is, northwest, northwest, southwest. Would you imagine, though, that this drive would serve that part of the site, or would another curb cut, another access point be developed if something happens on that?
I mean, right now, we have done an overall analysis to prove that, and that's partially why we extended the median down as far as we can, to try to get a longer queuing length
Okay.
as you exit the property. The total site on the Meadows will accommodate 300,000 square feet based on the sketch plan. But right now, at least the analysis we have would prove that this entrance can function with the total build-out.
So that would be the long-term goal, is that this would really be the collective
That's the
vessels?
plan now.
Okay.
That'd be the plan now.
The staff is aware of that and comfortable with the layout, okay. All right, great.
Hi, I'm Meryl.
Hi.
I'm with Studio MLA Architects, and I'm excited to share this with you. We're first going to talk about the exterior play areas and the landscape, and then I'll discuss with you and present the building exterior design. So to begin with, so here we have our monument sign that lives right at the entry access road. And this is a sign showing how we're going to submit it later in the approvals process as part of a separate permitting signage that we'll submit along with the permit. So this is our suggestion and our design direction at the moment as far as taking other existing and matching existing monument signage on the campus currently along Orchard Ridge Road, Orchard Ridge Drive. And we've made modifications to this based on planning department comments thus far by increasing the size of the lettering as well as adjusting the daylight, the lighting elements of the sign. And we'll continue to have a dialogue with the city about that.
So because this is being operated totally in-house, or at least with your own contractor, you're not really not naming it or branding it as a separate daycare facility. So that's why the relatively generic signage, I guess. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct. The plan is not to have the corporate logos or
Yeah.
identification on it.
Or some other company that does
Correct,
childcare.
nor will we have the service provider's name on that monument sign.
So we understand that the city is taking an approach to using a more natural materials in their place spaces that are public, such as the Constitution Gardens. And we're using a similar approach in our playground and landscaping design to embrace a natural look and feel and allow the children to explore nature with all of their senses. Some of the landscape principles that we've instilled here are to create an environment of exploration, experimentation, and learning. The playground design is as important as the building design since each classroom has immediate access to the exterior and becomes an extension of learning. As you saw in the previous slides, we've divided the landscape into 4 different areas based on the different age groups. We're also planning for drought-tolerant native plantings to reduce water use and to provide shade. Some of the materials that we're proposing for the playground surfaces throughout the play areas are poured-in-place rubber, play sand, hydro-seeded native grasses, asphalt, artificial turf, and ipe decking. So there's also going to be water elements in the playgrounds as well as structures to provide shade. We're providing a perimeter fence to surround the entire play area to keep the kids safe. And here you can see the Toddler 2's play area, and this has direct access from their classrooms to their age-appropriate playground. So there's also a walkway parallel to the building facade. The Toddler 2's classrooms have direct access. We're incorporating a sandbox with an outdoor play kitchen, and to take advantage of the berm along Orchard Ridge Drive, we're incorporating an embankment slide into the contours.
I want to play this.
You know, that's what I'm saying. They should build one of these for the parents.
While you're
Sign up.
while you're still in that
Yeah,
plan,
sure.
the fence is at the top of the berm. It's at the peak of the ridge of the berm.
Correct. And
What kind of fence are you?
yep. So it's actually this one in the top right corner is the fence that we're going to have around the entire perimeter. And when it's on the berm, we're actually going to have it on the downside just slightly so that there can still be supervision from the teachers, but also to allow enough play space so that they can go to the top of the hill and run down. So it's a little bit of a happy medium for the protection and the supervision of the children, but also not letting them go too far down so that the teachers can't see them on the other side of the
So no
road.
one can, I mean, if someone needs to they need to really go around to get into the area. So there's not an issue with security in
Correct.
that
So
regard
there's-
because it's next to the wooded area?
So this is actually along Orchard Ridge Drive, is along here.
Oh, okay,
But-
okay,
For the other playgrounds, it's a tall enough fence that
okay.
it's going to prevent.
So yeah, go back to that. If you don't mind. So the
Yeah.
image of the fence for along Orchard Ridge Drive, how tall is it? And that's a little small. Can you zoom in, you think? Or Hardy, can you make that?
So it's called an Amiga fence, and it's actually it's a good size of perforation so that the kids can't get stuck in it, because that's also a concern.
Sure.
And it's also non-climbable, which is another
Oh, sure.
for the alternative.
Yeah.
So
But how tall is it?
6 feet is what
6 feet.
we're planning at the moment, but
And is there a landscape buffer on the street side of it? Or
Yes.
there-
Yeah. there is.
I'm not good enough to know how to
Don't
make it
worry about
bigger.
that. That's fine.
Any other questions with this?
You asked about the landscape buffer?
Oh,
Yeah, how that was being handled on the berm. Yeah.
So it's not at the apex of the berm. It's going to be closer to the building itself. Again, for the sight lines of the teachers who are watching the children. And then there will be landscaping on the hillside as well. So the combination of the placement on the hill as well as the landscaping and vegetation would be a little bit of a visual break for someone who's walking along the sidewalk and they're looking. But also painting it black also makes it disappear or recede into the sight
And a
line.
6-foot fence is relatively imposing, compared to the residential fences that you see in front. I mean, obviously out back you get a lot of things, but I'm just thinking about the appearance along. It doesn't want to appear too fortress-like as you're coming up Orchard Ridge Drive.
So
And
when
I
you're-
didn't see anything specific in the plan about the landscaping was on the other side of the fence. So I don't know what exactly is happening there.
I got it.
Oh,
bigger.
great.
but we can go back
Oh,
to
yeah.
Hopefully. Let's see. I just messed it up again now.
So the fence is going to be pretty protected along Orchard Ridge Drive. You're not just going to see this big blaring fence. It's going to have vegetation around it.
Yeah, I think the fence is on the downhill side of the berm.
Yeah,
So it's
it's-
probably 2 feet off the crest. So from the street, it may only appear to be 4 feet.
Okay.
And then there'll be landscaping along the berm ridge itself of evergreens.
On the street
and
side.
shade trees and understory shrubbery.
Okay. Good.
Let's see what we got now. Oh, okay.
Is that the right one?
Yeah, no, we're good.
Okay.
So this is the natural play area, and again, it's activating the senses here in our natural playground with gardening boxes along the STEM classroom, which is in this isolated structure here, which I'll discuss in more detail when we talk about the building. There's plenty of opportunity for sensory exploration. Here we have our preschool playground, and there's opportunity for the older kids here to build and create. And here is our school-age playground, where there will also be age-appropriate climbers for upper body strengthening and opportunity for challenges such as at the ball wall. At this age, the children are engaged in more community play, and this playground provides ample opportunity for that. So next, we're going to shift into the building exterior, its design, and how it seamlessly relates to the site. So from the initial design, the center is intended to speak to the campus while relating to the scale and curiosity of the children in the meadows. So we've carried many of the initial key design principles through to where the project design stands today. So first and foremost, the center is to provide a safe and nurturing and healthy environment for the children and their families. We've designed the building in a way that it becomes a teaching tool by the use of natural materials, providing operable windows for natural ventilation and exposing the structure. So to achieve this, we aim to blur the lines between the inside and the outside. So the STEM that I previously mentioned is located along the south end of the curve and is an integral component to the design and the child care program. So the STEM is basically what the parents do as scientists every day. The location and orientation of the STEM building is also strategically placed given that it's a destination spot accessed by a covered bridge. So this is where experiments can happen, like watching the seedlings grow in the adjacent gardening boxes, then studied in a nearby discovery table, or taken inside to eat. So again, activating all the senses. So here's our view looking south at the entry. So this is the front north elevation of the center, which provides a covered trellis walkway to welcome families. And you can see materialistically that the front is more formal and solid to reflect the campus. So we have some design principles that we've instilled here by minimizing footprint on the site. As Brian and Eric spoke about previously, terracing into the land to maximize daylighting, to provide views, solar exposure, framing the woods as a private entity of the center and to protect the children, a low profile, which is integrated into the land, the idea to connect interior spaces to nature, design the building with sustainability as an educational and awareness tool for the children, and to provide daylighting strategies for energy conservation. So some of the design attributes that we've used are the site orientation to maximize solar exposure, to allow for direct access to the outdoor play from the classrooms, and to have daylighting maximized in the classrooms, and for the children to have both indoor and outdoor classrooms. So next we're going to be looking north at the north facade. So we're looking north towards the south facade we're going to see. So this is the south facade, which it hugs the woods and is adjacent to the forest conservation land. So this facade is less formal and more transparent. So this elevation provides a direct relationship to the woods that it faces. We're using wood wherever we can for the siding, for the butterfly roof structures inside and outside, and on the trellis. Our next view is looking west and at the slot between the STEM building and the main building. And here you can see the profiles of the butterfly roof that cover the STEM, the toddler, the twos, and the infant classrooms. So this is going to be an exposed glue lamp structure, and again, a teaching tool so that the children can see the way that the roof is supported. We're also using color film on the facade to tie the north and the south facade together, while adding a playful element and component. So the color film adds a visual interest at different times of day. It reflects the floors and walls, and it's educational as they attract the sun's movement. So the north elevation also has a thickness for the children that they can engage in. So on the north facade, it's set back to protect the kids from the elements, and then on the inside, it can be used as window seats or other programming elements. So here we have our exterior materials, and we have some samples here. So we're looking at a fiber cement panel, which is this material here. Thank you. And overall, we've selected these materials based on appearance as well as their sustainable qualities. So we are targeting LEED as our LEED Gold as our certification. Some of the design principles for the exterior have been using natural materials and colors to fit into the surrounding wooded area. This is the fiber cement. Thank you. So here's the fiber cement panel, and tongue and groove siding is similar to this. So here's our tongue and groove siding to be used. Different materials. And these will be vertical planks to react to the curve of the building. The front facade is thick and a solid wall. The back facade is more open and more transparent with glass. The roof, we're looking at a standing seam metal roof for the butterfly and TPO for the flat. So we also have clear story windows, some of which are operable as far as the educational component of the classroom goes, where a child will open a lower window and then a fan will activate that will vent the air through, and then a mechanical window will open, and a window will open mechanically from up high, so the stratification of the air will cut through the space. We're looking at wood glue lamp for the butterfly trusses, as I previously mentioned, and we're looking at an energy efficient envelope by using glass to minimize using the lights and to maximize natural daylighting, and using insulated materials for energy efficiency. So in incorporating these materials and sustainable building techniques, we're going to apply this to all phases of the building, from construction, design, and at the end, the operation, the future of the center. So I think that kind of summarizes it in a nutshell.
So you can see, we're very
nice.
excited about this project.
Yeah, it's great.
We could talk
Yeah.
about it for another hour if you wanted to, but
Nicely
we'll
done.
conclude our presentation and really open it up to any questions you might
Very,
have.
very nicely done. Is there any potential for expansion? Like if you open in your capacity, you need to add classrooms or add capacity. Is there anything in the kind of the back of your mind or on another page somewhere that allows for that, or is this pretty well maxed out at the size you're proposing it?
No, there's potential if we were going to expand it sometime in the future, we'd expand to the east side. There's enough space where we could add some classrooms.
And it wouldn't sacrifice any of the features you're proposing on it right
Correct,
now?
it would not sacrifice it. As a matter of fact, it'd be a natural continuation of the spine circulation zone within the building.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't have a question that nice. Can I see the aluminum? Storefront section?
Sure.
I'm
Actually,
sorry,
we're doing
the wood printed
Yeah, so
storefront
the-
section.
This is just to show the glass. We're actually doing a wood frame system,
Yeah,
so, yeah.
He likes to touch things.
So-
Yeah. Thanks for bringing finishes. by the way.
Sure. So the thicker piece is just to explain that, it's a glue lamp inside, and then there's that cap actually is for the exterior, and then those plexi slots are actually glass. So if you can imagine that becomes,
That's real, too. It's not even composite.
yeah.
That's shocking.
I do have a question, just
Sure.
clarification. If I'm looking at the main entrance and going from the main entrance, and that's noon, I'm going towards, let's say, 3 o'clock, that's the east side, right? If you're going around from noon being the entrance,
Yeah.
12 o'clock, and then going towards 3 o'clock,
Yep.
okay.
That's
There
easy.
doesn't appear to be any accessibility for vehicles on that quadrant. Is, in case of emergencies or anything like that, is there any provision to be able to have access at that point to get around? Because that's a substantial part, it's about 2/3 of the complex right there that's being cut off, it appears.
Sure, on the far side.
Yeah.
So we have been working closely with the Planning Commission and with the Department of Public Works about fire safety. So we talked about the vehicular access. So it was reviewed and deemed that the distances from that main parking lot were close enough for the fire
Okay.
staff to get in there. What we've also done is and you saw it probably quickly in the presentation that Meryl gave, there is a pathway that goes around the building. So if occupants come out of the building on the far side, they've got a paved route to get them back to the parking lot.
I couldn't see that when I went close up on the diagram, but now I understand, I appreciate it, thanks.
All right.
This, me being esoteric again, is there, and I know this doesn't have anything to do with this, but I just wanted, is there going to be like a PA system, like an all-call if there's ever like a need for an Amber Alert or something like that?
Yeah, so we work very closely with our child care provider. They've been part of this process from the beginning, not only with an eye at the architecture, but also how we're going to operate the facility itself. So items like PA system are part of the design, they're part of the operations.
Right.
We would like to have that in place. If there's a shelter-in-place type of alert that comes in, we have a designated area. We will have a designated area within the building for children and staff to congregate.
Okay.
It's more of a part of the operations plan.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Well, I guess just for the record, is there anyone here that's going to comment on this application, or is it just the applicant's team, or it's just the applicant's team? I get it, yeah. Okay. So Marty, what's the official recommendation?
Mr. Chair, staff recommends that the Planning Commission make a motion that the Planning Commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report and recommendations, grant approval of SP 7021 2015 MedImmune Daycare final site plan approval, finding it in compliance with the zoning code.
Okay. I do think the condition that talks about the feasibility of getting internal circulation, the pathways, I recognize and respect the constraints that happen because of stormwater management and utility easements, and I know that it crosses a piece of or may cross a piece of city-owned property. I don't know. I mean, I know all that can be worked out, but I think kind of in the spirit of this building that's exhibiting all things green and all things embracing the outdoors, a natural component that's missing is the walkway back to the main campus without, take advantage of that landscape and really walk through it. So I really hope that there's some serious work being done there to see if that's at all feasible.
Mr. Chair,
okay.
I may add that the 3 conditions that are on the staff report, that is one of the conditions that we recommend going forward.
Yeah. But other than that, what a wonderful building. I mean, congratulations on putting this package together. And it was a great presentation, and the layers of thoughtfulness and the layers of work that went into developing this building is very impressive. Gosh, I hope it actually gets built.
This is an absolutely amazing space, and I think that people are going to be talking about this for years. It is really, you all have done a fantastic job.
It's an inspiring building,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the only thing that's sort of a little sad about it is, not more of the general public, not more
Yeah,
buildings are built this
right,
way. This
right.
kind of care and, development
Yeah.
of a real design, layered decision-making process is just so exciting. We only have a few of these buildings, frankly, in the
This
city.
building's so cool. You have to name it like Falling Waters or something like that. You got to figure out the name.
Name's taken.
I know it's taken.
Copyright. TM.
All right. Anything else, Lloyd?
Yep,
Is it good? Okay.
I'm fine with it, yeah, just.
All right. So there's a recommendation for approval with 3 conditions. Is there a motion, please?
I can't find it.
Mr. Chairman, I move that, based on the exhibit submitted, the applicant's testimony, the staff report and recommendations, that we grant approval of SP-7021-2015, final site plan approval, finding it in compliance with sections 24-160.D.1 through 24-160.D.12 MXD zone and 24-170 of the city code, with the 3 conditions as previously read into the record.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you.
I was.
All right. So that takes us to from the commission. You guys better have something good after that. Well, can I start with you tonight? No pressure.
No pressure, no. No, I really have nothing to add after that. Thank you.
Great.
I just think it should inspire us to raise all of our building codes and zoning codes to a level that's, tremendously, obviously achievable, but very, very difficult. No, not really. It is inspiring, and it does set the bar a little bit higher. We've had a couple of projects come in lately that really are raising the bar of building quality in the city, and it's really good to see. And it does create some inertia, and we are able to point to the next 25 applicants that, look, it's been done. It is possible.
Yeah.
You can spend a little more effort, a little more time, and get a better product for something that will last, and typically 30 to 100 years in the city. So
Excellent.
it's great. It's inspiring stuff.
Yeah, anything tonight?
I'm inspired by his shirt, so. But
the
building.
right.
No, just the building to me is like a piece of art. It is just really just phenomenal, and I agree with you that this does raise the bar for folks that come into the city, and I think that'll be a destination for people to go just drive by it and see what it looks like. So it's exciting to see those kinds of things happening.
I agree. It's not art. It's real architecture. And that's
real
the thing we don't see
art.
this all the time. But that's good stuff. Thank you. And I was going to mention a point I talked to Marty about on looking forward to some strategic planning ideas, and I think you're going to pick that up from the staff. So should we start with that, or do you want to do the
Let's get
Mills
this one out of the
Road?
way first. I'm
Okay.
going to hand you guys a copy of a memo that Jasmine wrote, and I'm pinch hitting for her as well today. So this is a request for delegation of authority to approve a minor architectural change to a site plan on 9 Mills Road. This is a some vinyl siding was being proposed, and the owner
Eek.
wants to stucco the building and the house instead. The code is kind of, it basically gives us the authority if they're going up, but it says it has to go to planning commission if they're going down in quality. The siding to stucco, we couldn't quite decide if it was across, down, or over, and we just felt like we'd come to, and just to, be absolutely sure we'd get authority from you guys to work with them.
I don't think it's a problem, but, I was curious why this couldn't just be a consent item and be done with it, but why you wanted to get this is more of a procedural question, get the authority and then go do it, as opposed to just knock it all out in one step.
Partially, this applicant is one that we've been working with quite a bit, and plans change from day to day.
Oh, okay.
And so we wanted to be able to get them in, work through the building permit process, and be able to,
Sure.
make those decisions without having to say, okay, now we all agree, now let's go to planning commission and hold them up another month. Especially as we get this time in the season, if we can get them going, they can still
Get in before the
possibly
weather.
get building.
Great,
So,
okay.
Hey, but it says here also add a portico.
yeah, the portico, that's something that was added again yesterday,
Okay.
the day before, and so we just thought we'd throw it on
Throw
there.
it in there, too.
We still are going to look at, there's some questions whether it will even fit within the setback.
Okay.
I hate to put it this way, but, trust us, we're going to try to work them through this.
Trust me,
This is
trust
a
me.
single-family detached house.
Yes.
In a medium density residential.
Where we've already approved the sort of visible addition.
They came to you because it had to, they were adding a second story,
Right,
and so it was a
right.
change in the site plan, and so basically this is now back in front of you because they're further changing some elements of that, so.
My 2 cents is the stucco is definitely
It's
higher
up-
standard than
it's
vinyl,
up, yeah.
although I've seen big stucco houses and beautiful vinyl houses, but it's,
Yeah, I'd say stucco's enough.
Do you
yeah.
need a motion or just a conversation saying yes?
I think if you guys are all in agreement,
Yep.
that's good enough for us at
Yes.
this point, so.
Yeah,
Yes.
great. All right, move forward. Thanks.
Okay. Now, second, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, we wanted to talk a little bit about some strategic planning, and I wanted to hand out a couple of things. First thing I'm handing out is our actual part of the strategic plan for fiscal year 2016. And this is something that, an exercise that the entire city goes through as part of our budgeting and planning for the next year. And this is our division's part of the entire document. You'll see that it's page 50-something through 60-something. But I wanted to give that to you, and with somewhat of an apology from myself. I was fairly new when we started this year, and so I didn't get with the planning commission and get a whole bunch of input and work through. So we're trying to get ahead of that for next year. The thinking is that if we can start a conversation today, and maybe have an end goal of by the end of the year, first of the new year, having some things kind of laid out so that when this process starts in late February, early March, I already kind of have my marching orders from Planning Commission, and we've decided on a direction, and that enables me to craft a nice story and be able to go forward with things. So I mainly give you that not for necessarily discussion tonight, but just to refresh your memories, kind of you guys can see what's on our board for this year, and maybe come back at a future meeting and talk about some of that. Along with that, I wanted to hand out, this is just really quick from our,
This is like being in school.
shouldn't be any new information, but this is a quick list of our adopted master plans. And you'll see that we have done a lot of planning, and not a lot of it is super old, but some of them are getting a little bit dated. We wanted to give you this as we start this discussion. And Rob and I sat down earlier today, and I want to call attention to Rob's presence. I made him, I asked him nicely to stick around tonight
Sorry, Rob.
And through,
No
to-
problem.
Was there any finger wagging in there?
I am happy to be here to discuss this.
Rob is the long-range planning manager, and so this stuff really falls under his purview. And so I can, sit here and blow a bunch of hot air, but when it comes down to it, Rob's the one that actually makes this stuff happen. And so I thought it was important that he be here for our discussions and kind of hear what you guys want to say. And then also, we sat down earlier today and kind of just threw out a really quick list of questions. They were so kind of broad and big picture that I didn't even really want to print them out for you guys, because I just thought we'd get some conversation going. And then what we will do is try to maybe at the end of each planning commission meeting for the rest of the year is maybe take 5 minutes and hit on one of these elements. And so, but these, we wanted to start a conversation about what really needs to be planned in the city, what we've already planned to death, what is planned and needs to be redone, what pieces of plans go together. You can see from our list that the 2009 master plan process, you'll know that we just barely finished the environmental element of that. And so that was kind of one of these where it was a long process, and now, I don't know that just because we finished, we need to start all over again. Well, we want to take a more studied look at.
Then the two things that occurred to me is that on one is to begin to shift the tone, at least a little bit, of our planning report to not only what's been accomplished or what happened, but also what we anticipate happening next. Whether it's a planning process in and of itself, like updating a master plan element, or because in a lot of those elements there's implementation steps or proposed implementation steps, maybe a little bit of nudging and a little bit of advocacy for getting some of those implementation steps in place, which also dials nicely into the strategic plan where you're looking for funding and some focus for the following year. So that was sort of one part I thought would be very helpful. I don't know if, given where the you've already submitted the required report, I think, to the state, right, or it's completed and ready to submit if it's not already submitted. But I know there was always a follow-up version that's sort of the pretty layout to sort of publish to the public. Is there a target date for that?
We talked about that at our staff meeting on Tuesday, and we are working on that right now. And we did talk about adding a kind of a summary section to the end of that report that says, okay, here's what last year held. This is what going forward, what we're working on next. And I will say that the implementation steps, with just mentioning the environmental element, it's something that we've had a lot of conversations about in our office. Of we just adopted this environmental element, and already some of the implementation steps are seemingly being forgotten that they're included in there, and really we need to help take those next.
I think so. Just keep it in the, at least a little bit in the forefront for whether it's budgeting or just awareness and pushing a little bit. That's good. So where do you want to start, do you think?
So,
I'm sorry. So to finish that answer, if we wanted to get that forward-looking tone or element into the published planning report, is there time to still do that, or do you think that happens in the next?
No, I think there definitely is time.
Okay.
We'll work on that. We'll get you guys a draft. We'll probably send out some drafts via email.
Okay.
And that you guys have already approved the version that went to the state, so I don't know that we look for a formal approval of the colored, pretty picture version, but we definitely want your input, on
in
that.
the previous years with the annual planning report, we had done, not to the extent that we're discussing now, but we had forecast if we knew things were on the horizon. We had discussed it through various facets. Again, the state planning report is very technical. Data-driven, spreadsheet basically. They're not interested in pictures. They want to know, how many building permits did you issue?
Well, I like your approach that given that I think buried somewhere deep in the enabling legislation for the Planning Commission, there is some language about directing or overseeing the master planning process, so that we make it a regular agenda item. I think is very appropriate. So
I like that, but and also we know what's coming up, so we can make sure, we can adjust our schedules to make sure that we're available.
Yeah. And like I said, I think the idea of getting started now, late in the summer is thinking that, we don't need to necessarily take a lot of time every week.
Right.
working on this, but it also allows us time if we want to identify some work sessions to actually get into some bigger issues or something like that. We've got some things coming up that, Rob's going to be working with Parks and Recreation Division as they start a master plan. That's obviously, something that we may want, to at least, maybe get an overview of as they're going through that process. The Plan Maryland stuff that the state has done, and the state changing some of their rules to go to a 10-year, review process for master plans is something that we want to, probably broach with you folks. So, and then, the APFO and that discussion and where that ends up going is going to, obviously have an impact on some of our planning. We have, and you'll see in here, we have a community facilities element that was adopted in 2008, and along with this APFO discussion, that may be a good thing to spur some looking at that plan.
Are you proposing Parks and Rec as a separate?
Parks and Rec, Director Potter had approached me. I mean, they wish to actually do one that's like more in conformance with the land use article requirements. They have one on the books that's very old, didn't go through the traditional master plan process. They have been discussing this candidly. I do not know.
But that wouldn't be folded into a community facilities?
No, Parks and Rec wants to have their own separate one.
Okay.
Dealing with that. So my role in that obviously would be assisting with the land use element, but also the procedural bureaucracy involved with doing a master plan. But again, I don't know where that is with the pipeline. I just know this has been on their radar.
And part of, Rob and I, there's some great opportunities for us as we start looking at what type of format do we want to go forward with. Just because we've done it a certain way in the past with different elements, do we want to stay with that? As we kind of have those conversations, we may be able to influence somewhat what Parks and Rec does, so that those formats kind of dovetail with
Well,
each
I think
other.
now more than ever that more if not all of any development that happens, most if not all of development that happens moving forward is going to be redevelopment. There's probably a stronger linkage to economic development, strategic directions, and priorities and things like that than there might have been in the past, where we were looking at land use as if it's land all by itself. Now it's going to be impacting and driven by, I think, some strategic directions that are about revitalizing commercial areas
and also in Marty's in my discussion, transportation. I think the commission even acknowledged the environmental element was a change in tone and structure from the previous elements. That was the first one where, candidly, I got to run it. I wasn't being dictated on do this format. And I think with Marty's experience coming from other places, we feel it's very important in many ways for this next master plan update to be far more holistic in the various facets that are addressed. Not so much going back to like the 97 plan where you're going, and you will have live workingness. Well, no, you won't. Not that, but not going by the same token, we're just going, you're allowed every use under the zoning code, and that's it. That doesn't work either. So it's finding this stuff, and I think one of the things Marty and I discussed and that we want to discuss with you, especially important with the strategic plan, may potentially be, we're both firm believers if we're going to do this, some stuff needs to fall into place, but further, we need to have some background studies. One of my goals when I really did, really take over long-range planning, and just we haven't had the opportunity with the staff, was to begin analyzing specific facets. I mean, we know at the end of this month, we're completing, the joint works or the work session on VHB's study of 355 BRT. That is an important thing not only for transportation but land use and redevelopment. We just won the COG grant, increasing, use for underutilized MARC stations. That gets completed next July. That's very important. We're completing our commuter trend survey, a study just to understand the dynamics of how people are moving in and through the city of Gaithersburg, which other has. So
slowly.
Yeah, but it's these sort of things, and along with economic development, we feel it's important to have a bunch of other studies, potentially, like the study of multifamily rental in the city and projections going forward. We're finding it no longer makes sense just to use buzzwords like you'll be a TOD. What does that really mean? And we're even hearing that now in the public hearings.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
And to your point, Mr. Chair, the one thing I wanted to mention today is that we've already kind of made a decision, before I even started, but with the hiring of our our historic preservation planner that the historic preservation element was going to be the next part of the master plan that got done, and so we're starting on that. But as Rob said, the way we're starting that whole process off is an economic development study, and so basically, a white paper type thing that talks about historic preservation and the economic impacts in the city of Gaithersburg, and kind of setting the tone for the master plan as far as what impacts do we think it has, what has it, what can it affect going forward, and then how do we plan accordingly. So those are things that we're already kind of looking at. So
Okay, great.
so I will get you, the next thing that I owe you before our next meeting probably is a more formalized list of some of these questions that we're going to be starting to work through. And then maybe you guys could take a look at that. I'll get it to you a few days before me, and maybe start to rank or prioritize which ones you want to handle first. And I think that'd be a good way to kind of get rolling on this, and just, maybe 10-15 minute discussion at the end of each of the planning commission meetings, and we'll go from there.
I like that. Any other comments about the?
No,
We've
I was
waited forever
yeah.
for some great strategy. It's really great to
Right.
hear, and very, very exciting. I think, the action items are always helpful, but there's, a tier of 20,000 items below our 10-point, yearly action item list. And that will begin to inform what data, Rob needs to go chase. And it's not just economic, it's social and environmental, and I think it's really exciting stuff to see the bubbles of strategy start to.
And that's what we feel working with you. I mean, that will help us strategize that if we have to ask for money to hire consultants to help, specialize and get a study, or if it justifies, having more than one person in long-range planning,
Yeah.
to do stuff, it might benefit there.
Really good, targeted, result-driven data should be an explanation of why we need it. Yeah.
So,
All right, thanks.
So we don't have another meeting in August. So
Aw.
our next meeting is September 2nd. And and that will be recommendations for the APFO. So that's going to be a fun meeting.
Cool.
Is there a joint planning meeting on the 10th of August? There is one.
That's a work session with the council.
Next Monday,
Next
it's
Monday.
the schools test APFO that
Right.
then would be coming back that first meeting in September for your recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah. Good.
Promise to behave myself.
All right. Any other? Thank you, Marty. Thank
Thank
Rob.
you.
Thanks
Yeah.
for getting this going. I know it'll take some time to get some momentum, but that's fine. We're going to start somewhere. Any other staff? No.
So then we'll have a quorum for September 2nd?
Yes, I'll be here.
Okay.
All right. Good. Anything
If
else?
he gets here.
Yeah, if I get back.
Is that all for tonight?
And that
Oh.
is, there's also on August 31st, a work session of the mayor and council, but it seems to be of interest to you guys.
That's the CCT briefing, and then our
great.
Yeah.
Maryland 355
Yeah.
BRT study
Mentioned
results.
Cool, yeah, I'll
last
definitely watch
time.
that.
Could you do us a
I won't
huge
be-
favor and
won't be
make
here.
that an email so we
Sure,
can have it on our
reminder.
calendar? Even like how you do the calendar reminders
Right.
for
Yes.
meetings, that would be great.
Thank you.
It'd be
Yeah,
very
that'd be
helpful.
great.
Thank you
I
very
will
much.
not be here for that, but I'll email you my availability. Okay?
Okay,
All right.
okay.
Thanks.
As long as you're here on the 2nd.
I'll be back on the 2nd.
Unless he's not.
Okay.
If there's nothing else, have a good evening. We're adjourned.
Thank you all.